And welcome in the early line here on this Tuesday, the day after we crowned a national champion in college football. And it was certainly worth staying up last night to check it out if you had a chance to. We'll break that down coming up here in the 7 at 7. I'm Joe Ranieri. We'll be joined by Donnie Rightside here in just a couple of minutes. But we have got some storylines for you to get you caught up with from overnight, including Jim Harbaugh raising that championship trophy as gold and white confetti just kind of all over the place last night. What a different turn of events just 1 year ago when they unfortunately couldn't make it to the national championship game because they ended up getting upset by TCU. What a difference a year makes. 34-13, Michigan ends up handling their business. This comes now 9 years. That's right, 9 years after Harbaugh was announced as the Michigan head coach with expectations through the roof. It didn't work out all that well early on, but certainly first thing he tackled was beating Ohio State. And then the next thing he tackled after having 3 trips to the playoffs, he finally breaks through this year with this team. Unbelievable job last night in what was a very interesting game because it wasn't until about 9 minutes in the fourth quarter. It was a one-score game for the most part. And then it looked like that offensive line in the running game and certainly the defense got to Michael Penix Jr. there and Washington, who had their opportunities in this game. And they will reflect on this with what could have been a number of overthrows and misthrows by Penix. Did not look like the same quarterback that we saw a week ago against Texas, but let's be realistic. That was a pretty great performance and a totally different defense with Texas. So Michigan gets it done as we welcome in our radio audience here from around the country on this Tuesday now, January 9th. It is the early line. Joe Ranieri, soon to be joined by Donnie Rightside. And we've got a few other headlines across the sports world here in the 7 at 7 we're going to get to, including how about the Grizzlies? Ja Morant to undergo season-ending surgery for it looks like some sort of shoulder tear. Nobody really had any idea, at least we weren't sure what was going on, but an MRI actually showed it in the shoulder, so they have decided that they are going to call it a season here. He is anticipated to be ready by next season here. And in a scary moment last night with the Indiana Pacers, their star guard, Tyrese Halliburton, had to be carried off the floor by his teammates after slipping on the court as they were taking on the Boston Celtics. He was officially ruled out for the remainder of the game. And the good news is, because it looked very, very scary, turns out it was just a left hamstring strain. And they are hoping just a couple of weeks here, maybe to get that thing healed and get him back out on the court. But that was a pretty scary situation last night for the Pacers, who ended up winning in unbelievable fashion late in that game. What an ending that was, but they took down the Boston Celtics without their leader, Tyrese Halliburton. Not such great luck for the Phoenix Suns last night. Boy, oh boy. What a game this was. It was a back and forth for 3 quarters until they got until the fourth quarter. And that is when the rout was on. A 37-20 fourth quarter for the Clippers ends up sticking the dagger in the Suns here, who, again, for one of the few times that we've had a chance to see Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal out on the court, well, though that 3-headed monster was obviously not good enough to be able to take down what we got going on with Harden and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and take your pick. It was a heck of a finish last night for the Los Angeles Clippers. Another huge game last night. We really thought we heard no Dame Lillard for the Milwaukee Bucks, but we heard a lot of rumblings and Giannis going off about defense and that we have to play it and that we've got to be better. And boy, oh boy, there has been a lot of talk about the lack of defense in the Milwaukee Bucks and how they've been playing. And what did we get last night? Well, I think we got some sort of defense because, well, it actually didn't show up until the very end because by the time they got to the fourth quarter, pretty much that game was over. 132-116, the Utah Jazz upend the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, again, no Dame Lillard, no Cameron Payne, no true point guard, nobody to handle the ball. But this game was started in an absolute epic first quarter. 41-23, Utah blew the Bucks out at home, no less. The Bucks blew them out and pretty much put that game out of reach there. A 36-23 second quarter was all she wrote there. Defense or no defense for the Milwaukee Bucks, it did not matter. Also, in NFL news, Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants, your New York Giants there. And I can tell you, we thought maybe, just maybe, he'd be coming back here for the Giants, but as it turns out, he is stepping down. He is resigning as the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants here just 2 years after he came aboard. Wasn't a terrible season there for the defense. They couldn't figure out how to stop the run at first, but injuries really were the big story with the Giants this year. And we know they're going to go ahead and have some more questions coming up at the by the time we start next season, quarterback and defensive side there. And the Ohio State Buckeyes, as we welcome in Donnie Rightside joining us here on the 7 at 7 here in the early line. Donnie, we've got some other news in college football outside of the national championship. How about Quentin Judkins transferring, leaving Joey Freshwater at Ole Miss and heading to Ohio State? And all of a sudden, the way too early top 25 for next year, Ohio State trying to regain that number one spot over Michigan.
The check cleared, Joe Ranieri, from what I understand here for Quinton Judson here, going from the SEC now over to the Big Ten. And that's a big pull for Ryan Day. You need to ramp up that offense, which includes maybe a transfer at quarterback that might help you out as well as this also. So we're seeing that revamping, because if you are the Ohio State and you felt like you owned Michigan over the past 15 to 20 years, that pendulum has absolutely swung at this point, Joe. So now you're looking to retool for Ohio State, fresh off of a Michigan championship. We'll certainly see if that can help. But we got a lot more on the way this morning on the early line, so make sure you don't go anywhere, because you know why? We're going to recap that national championship game yesterday, the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies. You might look at that final score and say, what a blowout it was. But my goodness, into that fourth quarter, we had a really good football game. This is the early line. Joe Ranieri, Donnie Rightside, 3 hours to go. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
It's a lot of fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, a Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The Weiss said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6 and the 7 seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye week and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Yeah, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
National Championship recap right here on the Early Line SportsGrid Network, Sirius XM Channel 159. Down your right side, Joe Ranieri here. And what a game it was overall. 34-14 final. The Michigan Wolverines holding up the National Championship trophy. A perfect season at 15-0. Washington Huskies only muster 13 points. But let's get into this game and sort of set the table for it. Now, granted, Michigan won by 3 touchdowns in this game, a worthy cause. But heading into this football game, there were some question marks I had with Washington. Number one was, we knew how good their offensive line was, Joe, throughout the season. Also, how would they hold up against a Michigan defensive line that technically doesn't need to bring a lot of heat in the way of blitzing? Their front four gets a lot of pressure. I want to start there, and also the running game, which I thought was going to be key. The thing I love, Joe, with the Washington Huskies coming down the stretch was the reemergence of Dylan Johnson battling through injuries, but being an absolute hammer with a perfect chance here to mix in the passing game with Michael Penix. It was apparent the last play he played in the previous game, he got injured. I didn't think he would be that effective. Coming into the game, he just wasn't effective, basically running on one leg and getting injured on his first carry of the game. 11 carries for 33 yards. Coming into this game, what did you expect out of that Washington run game going up against Michigan here, Joe?
I didn't think he was going to play, to be honest. I don't know how you play with a high ankle sprain and then to get it re-injured there on one of the first couple of runs they gave him. I was like, what is he? They were already in the broadcast last night, Donnie. You had Herb Street and them being like, that's a tough scene. He looked like his head was down, like he was emotional. And then next thing you know, a couple plays later, here he is out on the field. And so, gutty, absolutely gutty performance. But Washington also all year, not very deep at the running back spot. So we knew this would look different without him being a part of the game plan. And boy, oh boy, it was out him. But it doesn't excuse a lot of the missed throws by Penix last night here that could have changed this game. You only need a couple of big plays to change the outcome, right? He had their shots. They had their shots in this game to make Michigan very uncomfortable. But unfortunately, Penix, unlike last week against Texas, just could not connect there with his receivers.
No, he certainly couldn't. And there were a couple really key plays early on in that game where you're right. We had coverage bust that you just had maybe a little bit underthrow to your outside shoulder. I thought it was coming inside in a couple of those key matches there. That certainly didn't work out. But if we're taking a look at here's what I love too about, handicapping, gambling, legalization of everything. The one thing in the NFL is we know we have practice reports, right? And we have beat writers. They can get to the bottom of a lot of situations and maybe read through the tea leaves here, what the coaches are saying. Here's what I loved about Dylan Johnson yesterday coming into this game. I thought he would be ineffective. He basically left the game did he tear his ACL? What did he actually hurt? But he not walking and then saying, I'm going to play a week later and be healthy on turf. We'll see if that happened. Now, it didn't. But as soon as he got that first carry, the announcer's like, yeah, well, sure, we knew all week long he had a bursa sac tear in his knee, and, it was going to be tough for him to get going. We didn't get any of that information during the week. I love how the announcers had that teed up for the moment that he took one snap and it was apparent that he wasn't healthy in this football game. So something certainly to look forward to the next couple seasons. Maybe we get that ironed out like the NFL does. But if we take a look at Michael Penix in this game, 27 completions on 51 attempts, 255 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. I think everybody coming into the game, if we remove Michigan's offense, I think Michael Penix is still going to have some success against Michigan. They haven't seen a high-flying passing attack like this. And quite frankly, nobody in college football, unless you played Washington, have seen 3 legitimate NFL wide receivers with a first-round draft pick at quarterback and a good offensive line. But it was apparent early on. It was a lot harder on Washington to move the football than even I thought it would be. And I thought Michigan would be able to win this game by -4.5 and cover with at least a touchdown here. Talk to me about Michael Penix during this football game, what you saw out of him against that Michigan defense here, Joe.
It was his worst, I think, performance and worst game all year long. And boy, you saved it for the very end, because we just talk about a roller coaster of emotions. He played by far one of the greatest games for a quarterback a week ago against Texas, where he was just dialed in. He was dropping dimes all over that field with wide receivers, by the way, last week who weren't open, and he was still making perfect throws to get it done. I thought that was phenomenal. They had everything, and he had everything rolling into this one. Everyone was healthy except for obviously his running back, but the wide receiver room was ready to go. And then he did not look like the same guy. Now, give Michigan's defense obviously credit for rattling it, but he did not seem in rhythm at all. And we know Washington and Penix went in rhythm, and they found some of it after they were down quick with those 2 touchdowns. He started to make some of the easier throws, started to make some difficult throws, but I do think it was some of the missed opportunities started to loom really large as that game went on there. And then eventually it was just, it was too much, because without the threat of a running game at all, he was kind of a sitting duck at that point with Michigan. But, I mean, Donnie, honestly, it kept him in it for 3 quarters. I mean, it wasn't until the 9-minute mark of the fourth quarter here where the kind of game got away from them. But prior to that, how many punts in a row did we get from Michigan? I think Washington's defense was really the unsung hero. I mean, the final score is not indicative of how close this game was because of the adjustments that Washington defense made after a couple of big runs in the first quarter.
No, you're right about that. And also, just getting back to that point where it helped Penix out a little bit. 20 carries, Joe, for 46 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. If you had any semblance of a running game, boy, those play-action passes and that offense probably could have really kicked it into gear. But you're right. Let's flip it over to Michigan here, because the running game, we expected to be dominant against Washington. Do we expect it to be 38 carries for 303? Joe, 8 yards per carry they averaged for Michigan Wolverines going up here against the Huskies. 4 touchdowns on the ground. And right away, Donovan Edwards, if you look at his season-long statistics game by game, you're like, okay, he's a fill-in guy. 5 carries here, 20 yards here. He looked like he was shot out of a cannon as the nation's best running back all season long. 6 carries for $104 and 2 touchdowns. His first 2 touches in this game went the distance and really set the tone. So Michigan not having to rely on J.J. McCarthy, which is always their game plan. He just has those supplemental passes, as I like to call it. They were absolutely dominant on the ground, but coming in as the handicap, that's probably what most people thought anyway, right, Joe?
Yeah, well, they did. And I mean, I think it's the first time we've ever had 2 100-yard rushers on the same team in a national championship game. I mean, 303 total yards of running, but a lot of that damage was done in that first quarter, where it looked like, Michigan was, and I mean, everyone knew they were going to run the ball, right? I don't think Kalen DeBoer and company were shocked that they were going to be handing it off, that 2-headed monster there. But it was those 2 big runs by Edwards. The lack of defense or being able to adjust was amazing to me after the first one. And then they pulled it off again, because those were huge runs. But it was as if once they got past that second level of linebackers there, who were all, they got all bunched up early and nobody could catch them. So guys were out of position. They let it happen not once but twice. But I think if you take out those first couple of runs, that 8 yards a carry goes down to about 4.5 for the remainder of the game. So it was the two big runs that really put Washington in the hole. It'd be one thing if they were playing from in front, but they were playing from behind from the get-go in this one, and that kind of changed the dynamic.
Joe, I told everybody yesterday, if you want a good 401k plan, you better take Blake Corum to get a touchdown. I don't care if it's minus 350, minus 400. That is going to be free money. And, of course, watching Donovan Edwards light the world on fire in the first half, I'm going like, this is the way it's supposed to happen here. The guy that scores every game and multiple times per game is not going to score because Donovan Edwards is going to have a takeover moment here. And if you would have told me even in the second half, like, Donnie, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, there's like 5 minutes in the game. He doesn't have a single touchdown, and he scores 2 rushing touchdowns in the final moments of the game. And also with me, the interception return, which Chantrell was running back, and I'm saying to myself, like, oh, he's gone, not even have a chance. The fact that he got tackled inside the 10-yard line, that smile came to my face as I stood up in bed. I was like, this has to happen here. And, of course, Corum got that second touchdown. 21 carries, $134, 2 touchdowns on the ground. What a way to cap off your career in Michigan as an unbelievable running back here. Much more on the national championship game right here on the early line on the SportsGrid Network.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices. We're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cup, so now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6 and the 7 seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye week and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Did you enjoy the national championship game last night? We certainly did here at the SportsGrid Network. The boys were pumping all the way up till finish last night. A 6-hour telecast, making sure you got all the knowledge you needed. And quite frankly, Joe Lisi here with his Donovan Edwards calls to go alt over his rushing yards, over 50, over 60, over 70, over 80, all the way up to 100 was a miracle because Donovan Edwards was spectacular in that first half. First 2 touches, 80-plus yards on those 2 touchdowns, 2 carries and 2 touchdowns. That was great stuff here. But let's talk here about what's next, Joe. What's next for the Michigan Wolverines? What's next for college football? But before we do that, let's look at the Michigan season as it went through because it was interesting all the way. The thing I get a kick out of, and I've done hundreds of shows here, Joe, on the network, and this year alone, there's not one team that had my ire more than Michigan, where they didn't play anybody for 16 weeks, it felt like. You had a coach that was like, hey, we didn't do anything wrong, but suspended multiple times. You have the players buy into, I can't believe we're railroading our own coach here from our university and the NCAA instead of saying, you know what, we erred in our ways. But they used that as a rallying cry throughout the season. Different head coaches calling the helm in different games here. Harbaugh misses 6 games. Talk to me about Michigan totality on the season this year and the roller coaster ride that was a national championship.
Well, it's cliche, Johnny, but, Donnie, they say that, you've got to, in order to win, sometimes you've got to lose. And, look no further than that complete debacle last year against TCU, knocking them out of the possibility of getting to the national championship game, the way they got embarrassed. And, and it starts with the top, with their quarterback, right? All of the guys from that team, the guys that meant something, and again, could have transferred out, could have said, screw this, we were done. If Harbaugh was not the coach he was, then there could have been a mass exodus last year after that. But you know what? The core of those guys all decided to come back. McCarty says, we'll be back here next year, I promise. And that was it, man. And so it was that failure last year, I think, that helped propel this team to go through not just, obviously, the schedule, still got to win the games, right, ultimately, but they had to go through the fact that 6 games, they didn't have their coach. And that every time they opened up social media, there were people taking shots at them. So this team had to go through a lot, but not just this year. This team had to go through a lot of heartache a year ago to get to this point, and it's great to see. I mean, a really great story to see that they've overcome all that adversity to get it done this year.
And also from a Michigan outlook here, let's just take out like the Connor Stallions situation, right? There was years gone by with Jim Harbaugh. They're like, this is a joke. Like, yes, they're a quality football team, but they just can't beat Ohio State. They'll never compete with Ohio State. And Jim Harbaugh thinking that he should be fired 2 or 3 years ago because he couldn't beat Ohio State. Boy, has he turned that program around where now you're looking at if Jim Harbaugh does stay, which we'll get to in a few moments, now they're the dominant Big Ten football program, and Ohio State is absolutely reeling when just a couple years it was a complete role reversal. If we take a look at Michigan on the season itself and take a look at some of those preseason odds to win the championship, plus 850, obviously they did that. To make the playoff here, plus 125, obviously they did that. Big Ten regular season champs, undefeated regular season, and so forth. They achieved all of their goals, which is very tough, and also still under the pressure of a 14 playoff. You lose one football game in the Big Ten, particularly when you didn't have much competition through September, October, and early November, you're probably not going to make it. So they upheld all the expectations, which then brings us into the next realm here. Harbaugh as the coach of Michigan's success. If he goes to that university this morning and goes, you know what, I know you're offering me like $10 million a year, make it $17 million a year and I'll stay, they would make it $17 million a year. But it's what you want to do. If you're Jim Harbaugh, you went back to that university, resurrected the program, won a championship. They're going to build statues of you there. For your look here, Joe, we'll talk about the pros in a second. Do you just stay in Michigan and ride this thing out with an endless paycheck for the next 10 years and ride off into the sunset? Is that what we're doing here with Jim Harbaugh?
I don't think you know. And I don't think you know because it's not the same old next year. Everything is changing. The conferences are changing. The 12-team playoff is changing. So everything that he just spent 9 years building, resurrecting and building for this format, if you will, right? Because it's always beat Ohio State national championship or bust, right? Well, that's great when it's 4 teams. Now you've got a whole slew of new teams coming in. You've got realignment all over the place. You've got 12 teams. You're competing in an NIL where this was not what he did when he took this job, by the way. Everything has changed in 9 years. So you've got to wonder whether or not is he committed to see this thing through this new generation of college football and the playoffs and divisions and everything else? Or is he, listen, I came here to win a championship, beat Ohio State, win a national championship. There's nothing left for me here to do. Michigan's in a great spot. I got some unfinished business in the NFL. And I think that's a big possibility here when it's all said and done.
And also getting that national championship, right? That's the end goal here. Is I came back here. I love Michigan. I told you we'd be Michigan men here along the way and win a championship. And he did that because the blank checks from both sides are going to happen. Michigan's going to say, we'll match whatever the NFL has. And these big time owners in the NFL will be like, hey, look, we know you want to get back to the NFL. Come on over here. And nobody again at Michigan would blame Jim Harbaugh if he left the program tomorrow, let's just say to coach the Vegas Raiders here for $20 million a year. And also there is something about being an NFL coach, right? The top pinnacle position. And also, look, you're going to put in long hours regardless. But if I had the chance to say I could make $15 million here or $15 million there, oh, by the way, you don't have to recruit 365 days a year and worry about if these kids are pulling out and renegotiating NILs year to year with your players who want to leave. You just go to the professional ranks and you don't have to deal with that. And there is also something about being with the San Francisco 49ers, multiple NFC championship games, a Super Bowl appearance, not having that trophy and saying, you know what would be perfect? Me going back, having all the power in a new organization for the NFL. I can be my own GM. I can pick my guys here, and I got a blank slate. That is certainly appealing because what he's done at Michigan has been great. It didn't start out over those first 9 seasons as, peachy keen up on the campus in Ann Arbor, but as of late, this is the most dominant program in the nation, capping it off with the national championship. 3 Big Ten titles, 3 playoff appearances, and 1 national championship. Now, let me ask you this question here, Joe, because in the 80s and 90s, I think the pressure was really thank God there was no social media, but only one team won the national championship. Even in the BCS era, only 2 teams got to play for that. College coaches now looking at the top 12 going, you know what? As long as we make it into the dance, I'm going to be safe here. The pressure, I think, was so much more immense that 2 get in and then 4 get in. Now 12 get in. It sort of greases the skids here to say, I can lose a game or 2 here as a big program and still make the playoff. Do you think that might weigh on his mind by saying, like, hey, I got that championship. We're going to be a perennial playoff team. That's all you can ask for, and the fan base will be happy. How do you view that changing aspect of the NCAA with expanding the playoff for the college coaches sticking around longer?
Well, there's a flip side to that, too. And don't forget, it's now that you are at the top, right? You're at the pinnacle. You're under even more scrutiny now. And nobody has been more scrutinized than Jim Harbaugh has over these last couple of seasons here. So, you have to wonder if he's at the point now where there's nothing left for me to accomplish. The only way it can go is down from here, right? Because anything short of not beating Ohio State and not playing for a national championship is a total failure there. So there's got to be some sort of sense of accomplishment. Like you spent 9 years, you gave up 9 years of your life dedicated to bringing back a national championship to Michigan, and you did it. What is left? Because there's only one way I see this going for him, and that's down. The chances of him going back to back in a 12-team era now is, everything changes. And yet, I do think part of him always had in the back of his mind unfinished business in the NFL. Don't forget, when he left basically because he couldn't get along with Trent Baalke. Because Trent Baalke wanted all the credit, and yet it was Harbaugh telling him, you don't know what you're doing. I understand what's going on. And they kept clashing with the heads there. So he goes and becomes a god at Michigan. What's left here now? There's something to be said for getting the hell out of there after you accomplish what you've done, because everybody's going to want to take a shot at Michigan and Harbaugh next year.
Yeah, and by the way, you take a look at how Alabama was resurrected. Like Alabama, some kids in this new millennium here, like, well, Alabama was always good. No, they were great under Bear Bryant, and then they had a little bit of a run in the early 90s, and then hit the absolute skids here until Nick Saban wrestled them away and said, we're going to be a national power again. But I also remember this. You remember the kick? Obviously, everybody does. The kick six game versus Auburn, which they lost, which knocked them out of the playoff picture. There was a contract on the table, and Alabama fans were like, yeah, I don't know if we should re-sign Nick Saban. Looks like he's lost it a little bit. And I remember Saban went like a month or two without putting his name on that contract, and all of a sudden the Alabama fans, oh, no. Give him whatever he wants. Please come back to the fold. Just because Jim Harbaugh won that and is now a legend in Michigan, go the next 3 years losing 3 straight to Ohio State and see if all those good vibes are still around campus at this time. It certainly turns quickly, but again, that's why you get the big bucks here. Quickly next year, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, and Michigan in the top 5 for the odds race here at the FanDuel Sportsbook to be the national championship. We going back-to-back in Michigan, Joe. What's going on there?
Yeah, I'm a little disgusted. I don't see Liberty in there. No Boise State. I don't see Cincinnati. I don't understand what's going on.
JMU.
Oh, yeah, that's what is that? What kind of fairness is that here? You got to be kidding me here. Yes, it's always going to be this rinse and repeat. Always. I don't care how many teams you include in the playoff. Those names on that screen are always going to be there.
Exactly. We'll see. Next year, expanded playoff, big-time changes to the Power 5 conferences, the Pac-12, now the Pac-2. Unbelievable times here, but Michigan did cap an unbelievable 2023 season with a national championship, and now we wait to see where Jim Harbaugh is going to go. Back to Michigan, or does he go to the NFL? I'll tell you what, the Clippers are looking to make a championship run in the NBA, Joe Ranieri. Talk some NBA action next.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, a Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's all a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cup, so now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6 and the 7 seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye week and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Yeah, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Were you watching the national championship game yesterday from start to finish? Well, yes, most of us were doing that yesterday. That's what we do. We love sports. But the NBA, full slate last night, Joe Ranieri, and we're going to talk about it right now on the early line. Because why? We had a big-time matchup out on the West Coast last night. It was the Suns and it was the Clippers. By the way, the Clippers were the home team here, favored anywhere between 5 to 7 points, depending on where you got that line, by closing. The final score in this game, 138 to 111. So if you woke up this morning, Joe Ranieri, and said to yourself, oh, look at that. Suns in the big three, they didn't play at all. It's clear maybe Devin Booker played, maybe Beal sat that out, maybe Kevin Durant sat it out. No. You were full gas on both sides in this game, and the Clippers were absolutely phenomenal last night, led by James Harden's 19, 10, and 7. And you did get 30 points out of Kevin Durant. But the big three, a big disappointment so far this season for me, Joe.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we've only seen them now like 6 times together. It's amazing. But while we have seen this Phoenix big three fall flat here with Beal, Booker, and Durant, it's the Clipper big three that has been absolutely unbelievable. And don't forget, I mean, Harden didn't get there till what, about a month and a half into the season? When did the Sixers finally oh, that's right. The Sixers decided like 2 years ago they didn't want Harden, but that's okay. And he couldn't wait to get to LA, and now it is starting to pay huge dividends. This was close until, and it was amazing watching this game, Donnie. This game was all about the Phoenix Suns and the Clippers exchanging blows until about the final 60 seconds of each quarter. And then the Clippers went on a little bit of a run to win each quarter. And then finally in the fourth quarter, it was too much, man. Paul George just took it over, and that was the end of that.
Now, when we take a look here, because the odds makers in the NBA, we're going to get to the Western Conference odds in just a second here, but it's typical. It's not like the NFL where it's like, hey, man, the regular season really means a lot and seeding means a ton here. I was under the notion coming into the season, like my pick in the Western Conference was going to be the Phoenix Suns. I thought the Boston Celtics overall, Joe, would be the best team in the NBA. But making its way through, I said, you know what? They're going to have a whole season to get this together. They're going to get this right. And for the first part, like we're in the month of January. It feels like the NBA season just started on Christmas Day, which is usually that unofficial start where everybody starts to pay attention. And I said to myself, sooner or later, the big three will get it together. But the big three has barely been on the court each other, playing and getting used to each other. This night, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, all on the court last night. 20 points for Booker, 15 for Beal. Durant had 30 points. I'm starting to get those vibes that it might not work out all that well in their favor because the West is a very tough conference. But from your vantage point here, is it time to panic yet, or is it just the old NBA adage? Look, I don't care if the Suns are the 1 seed or the 10 seed here in the play-in tournament. If you just have those 3 guys on the court healthy in the playoffs, they'll be able to do damage.
Well, I mean, if you're to tell me we're going to get from Durant, Booker, and Beal 30, 20, 15 every game, I'm good. The problem is their supporting cast is a shell of what the Clippers supporting cast is. That second bench coming over there. I mean, Gordon was next. He's been hurt, but Gordon had 12 points. But after that, what? You didn't have any. Nurkic only had 8. Grayson Allen only had 8. So the supporting cast the difference between these two teams is the depth of the Clippers right now and the way they're playing. I mean, Norm Powell, that's the guy coming off the bench for you. You put Terrence Mann in the starting rotation with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and Hard. This is a beast of a team right now. All of those pieces are fitting perfectly. And again, to Phoenix, maybe this team will be a little bit better after, in February. But right now, they're still trying to tread water here and figure it all out. But I think the depth is the biggest problem with the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But for my money, as I line it up, like I'm not giving up on the Phoenix Suns, and neither is the FanDuel Sportsbook at this point. We bring in those conference odds here currently. It's the Denver Nuggets at a plus 180 price to win the West, the Los Angeles Clippers at a plus 550, the Phoenix Suns also at a plus 550, and the Oklahoma City Thunder at a plus 750 price. So Phoenix still balancing out, saying, hey, they're a good basketball club, even though they're hovering around 500. And also, looking at the Clippers, who opened up the season once they got James Harden, like, this isn't going to work, Joe. There is no way this Clippers team is even going to make it to the trade deadline. They're going to have to blow this up. Westbrook goes, you know what? I'll go to the bench here. I'm fine with that if that's what works. First couple games, it really didn't work. But now it's sort of kicked in here where this team is playing like it is one of the best teams in the NBA. A plus 550 price. Is that something that you might buy into? Or is that pessimism going to come out and be like, look, I know they're playing well now, but we all know what the Clippers are about once the playoffs comes, which means we're going to have multiple injuries and guys checking out and them not doing anything here.
Yeah, the real key to all of this Clipper craziness is the health of Kawhi Leonard. And the fact that he is as healthy as he is, finally, the first time since, dare I say, he took the Toronto Raptors to a world championship here. This is the kind of effort we're getting from Kawhi this year. And as long as Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, that tandem stays healthy here and can handle this grind, if they are healthy going into any playoffs, I'm telling you right now, you're going to wish that you were watching this here in the middle of January, Donnie, and grab that 550 on the Clippers now, because when Kawhi Leonard is focused and healthy like this is, yeah, good luck, guys. The guy's a total assassin. He's a sniper, and he's got more talent around him here than he ever did in Toronto.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see it play out here, but the talent is there for the Clippers to win a championship. The only question mark is going to be, will they be healthy and will they be motivated, and will this team actually stick it out and stay together? Let's take a look at some other action here in the Western Conference, or particularly a Western Conference team that we might have to watch out for. That's the Oklahoma City Thunder, 136 to 128 over the Wizards. It feels like anytime you play the Wizards, you just pencil yourself into 125 points and just see how much times you can run that up with the dial. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's been tremendous this year and is in the MVP race here in 2023-2024, 32.6 rebounds and 3 assists here. Kuzma chipped in with 22 and 15 for Washington. This just in, Washington is bad, and the Thunder just might be a playoff contender.
Yeah, but the problem is, who are you going to beat if you don't get any stop? This was never a game that OKC was up 30 and Washington closed. Washington was always a couple of buckets away from overtaking OKC, and I think maybe that's the biggest question mark with this young team, OKC. Can they score? Absolutely. Is Washington going to give you any defensive resistance? Absolutely not. But you only won by 8, and you had to call a million timeouts in the fourth quarter because they kept you could not get a stop on Washington. At some point, you got to play some defense here, OKC. So until I see that, I wouldn't be laying double digits with OKC just because they're winning games.
How about this next one here? The Indiana Pacers, 133, the Boston Celtics, 131. Just a few days previous here, the Boston Celtics hammered the Indiana Pacers. And if you would have told me, hey, by the way, Celtics won easy in their last game against the Pacers, and you're only going to get 13 minutes out of your young superstar guard, Tyrese Halliburton, in this game. Yeah, good luck with that. Well, how about that? You did get good luck. They win that basketball game by 2 points here. Horford chipped in with 11 points, Holiday 21. You even got a 40-point effort last night out of Brown for the Celtics. But maybe Jason Tatum not being in the lineup played a big decision in that final outcome. But also, as I said, Halliburton went down. The Pacers feel like dragon slayers at this point. Hey, Bucks, no problem. You want us to handle the Celtics? Yeah, we got that too. It's a fun team to watch, but now we head to the MRI machine, which could derail the Pacers season as it stands right now, Joe.
Well, I mean, let's hope. It was very ugly the way it happened. He did a split, and he was kind of holding his knee, but his leg, so you weren't sure. But and by the way, do you not have a stretcher in the building? Why do two guys have to carry him here like he's out of a bunker into the locker room? Like, it was the strangest thing I've ever seen. Like, can't you get a wheelchair? Like something? It looked like two guys, like they were like it was a World War II movie. Two guys trying to bring a guy to safety. Like, what are we doing here? But if it's just a hamstring, that would be tremendous news for Indiana. But you kind of knew watching that game last night, Donnie, when it happened, because the Celtics were in full control of that game. And then, of course, like everything else, when your star goes down, guys rally and step up, and that's exactly what Indiana did. One of the craziest final 8 seconds of a game you will see this year here, Donnie, where not one but two calls got reviewed and overturned within 8 seconds at the end to give the Pacers the win. It was wild.
By the way, you bring up a good point here. Like, these arenas have Zambonis driving through them. We can't get a cart for the NBA players if somebody gets injured at midcourt. Why don't we have that?
It's no idea. I thought they were going to drop him halfway through the tunnel. I'm like, what are you doing with this guy? Will you? If he can't walk, somebody please go get a wheelchair for him. It was very strange situation, but they came out a different team in the second half with him not on that court. So listen, they're still a young team and they're growing, Donnie. I mean, and they're getting better and better. They're growing up in front of our eyes, this Indiana team. 21 wins. Their season win total was 37.5. You tell me how they're not getting 40 wins here, with or without them.
Yeah, no, I like the brand of basketball. It's fun. And if you want to bet props whenever the Indiana Pacers are in town, they usually work out in your direction here. How about this score last night? The Utah Jazz on the road, 132, 116 over the Bucks. Here's what's interesting. And again, sometimes it's when you play teams here, because the Utah Jazz cruised into Philly and smashed them. Why? Because Joel Embiid wasn't in that game. The Utah Jazz cruised into Milwaukee, smashed them. Why? Dame Lillard didn't play. But that's an impressive performance overall for the Utah Jazz, saying, you know what? Maybe we were better away from home and not in altitude. Big performance by the Jazz last night here, Joe.
Yeah, and just another egg by Milwaukee, who has been screaming and yelling. And mind you, this was 9.5 yesterday morning, and eventually it closed at around 8. But how can a team who gets no stops go in without one of their leading scorers? You didn't lose any defense because Lillard wasn't there. But at the same time, I mean, how are you laying nearly double digits with a Milwaukee Bucks team who can't stop anybody? And they made this whole big thing about it's got to be effort. We got to play better D. I mean, Giannis blew up the other night, and okay, congrats. And what'd you do? You got boat raced in the first half here. You were down 30. It's not good. Lillard or no Lillard, it ain't good in Milwaukee right now.
No, certainly not good in Milwaukee. And it's interesting, too, because most people say, maybe you should have kept Drew Holiday and not got Damian Lillard. You can't fault them for getting Lillard. Everybody was excited by that. But Lillard basically plays one really good game, one bad game. One really good game, one bad game. You need more consistency here out of Damian Lillard, but a long way to go in the season. We'll see if the Bucks certainly can tie it together. Let's take a look at those FanDuel odds here for the Eastern Conference as it currently sits. The Boston Celtics, a plus 125 price to win the conference. The Bucks, plus 195. Then that little shelf here, which has the Sixers all alone at a plus 550 price, followed by the Heat, the Knicks, and the Cavaliers. Is it still Celtics and Bucks here, Joe, in your mind to carry the East?
Not even close. And once again, the two teams at the bottom hand of that column will get no respect. But I'm not sleeping on the Knicks. I am not sleeping on, you guessed it, the Miami Heat. It's amazing to me how we just seem to, these are the afterthought teams. And yet, they will figure, we all know Miami's making the playoffs. We all know they're going to be a giant pain. Same thing with the Knicks in this new look. If they can keep it together and stay healthy, that's a nice price to be jumping in on right there, Donnie.
Yeah, no kidding. And also at the trade deadline comes up here, the buyout season will begin. Some of these teams are going to fortify their rosters. We'll see if they can hang around. But for right now, for me, it's the Boston Celtics at a plus 125 price. I still think they take down the Eastern Conference. The Heisman Trophy, it's never too early to look at those odds. We'll be right back on the other line.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices. And we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take a
it.
little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6th and the 7th seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye week and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Quick little segment here before we hit hour number 2 right here on the early line, Sirius XM channel 159, SportsGrid Network. Now, it is a big day for college football. As we say, thank you for a fantastic season. And by the way, like we always say this, I mean, football season is very long when you think about it. But when it ends abruptly, it's like, boy, what are we going to do now? It's only January. I got to wait till August to see some college football again. But the odds never sleep here. And at the FanDuel Sportsbook, Joe, the 2024 Heisman odds are currently out. Now, you're getting some pretty good prices. Nobody's listed at a minus 100 price, which I can't remember what Caleb Williams was, but I'm pretty sure he was in a plus 750 like we're seeing from Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck along with Jalen Milroe. Dylan Gabriel 10-1, Will Howard 15-1, and Nico Amaliva, which is a fantastic name that you can fit in there. He's at 15-1. I actually don't even know who he plays for, but it looks like I'm going to assume he's a quarterback because everybody on that list is a quarterback.
Yeah, Tennessee is who he plays for because he was the one who stepped in for the bowl game for Joe Milton when Milton decided that he wasn't going to play there. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of very familiar names on that list there, but you have to. The Heisman is also about popularity and exposure, and which one of those schools. The problem that I have with anybody from Georgia, and I think Beck is fantastic, but it's never going to be about the quarterback in Georgia. It never is. It never will be. Oregon, I think, is interesting. And who gets the job? Is it Moore or is it Dylan Gabriel? That quarterback room in Oregon is tremendous. That is definitely something I keep an eye on.
Yeah, it'll be, and also is Quinn Ewers actually going to be at Texas next year, which is another great one, which we expect him to be there. But then that means maybe Arch Manning is on the road, and where is he going to end up going? There's a lot of stuff that's going to shake out in college football next year, which includes like which conference are you actually going to play in, and if you are in Oregon now, moving to a different conference, how does that affect it? When usually the Pac-12 was much more wide open offensively at this point, but other guys will step to the plate here. But it's good to see here. Big prices on some of these guys if you take them early. We'll see how it works out. Hour number 2 on deck. We'll be right back in about a minute. Don't go anywhere.